Welcome to this lecture where I will introduce you to the key components of Articulate Storyline 360. You must understand these fundamental components of Storyline to work with this software effectively. So let's get started. All right, the first component is the scene. Just like in a movie, which consists of several scenes, a course module in Storyline can have multiple scenes. Next is the slide. One scene can contain several slides, and a group of slides forms a scene. Now, the next component is the layer. One slide can have multiple layers. The slide itself is called the base layer, and all other layers created for that slide are built on top of the base layer. A layer consists of various objects. Objects refer to, all the items you place on a layer, such as graphics, text, images, video, or audio. Objects can be further broken down into states. An object itself is in a normal state, which you can change as per your requirements. So these are the key components you will use when working with Storyline. Now, the next three components are transition, animation, and trigger. Transition is applied to layers and allows you to control how a layer enters or exits the screen. Animation is applied to objects and enables you to animate the objects on the screen. You can move an object from left to right, right to left, top to bottom, highlight it, or decide how it moves on the screen. Next is the trigger. A trigger is applied to objects, just like animation, but it is a very powerful and unique feature of Storyline. It allows you to switch to a different layer when you click a particular object or interact with an object. You can use triggers to change the state of an object, among other functions. We will explore how to use triggers in Storyline in an upcoming lecture. The next important component is the timeline. The timeline is used for objects and defines the duration for which an object should display on the screen. Now you have an overview of all the key components of Storyline. Let's open Articulate Storyline and see where all these components are located. The first component is the scene. Here we are in the backstage area of Storyline 360. Let's click New Project to open a new project. This is where you'll be creating scenes. You'll notice that an untitled scene is already present in this space. You can create new scenes using this New Scene button. Alternatively, you can also right-click an existing scene to open a context menu from where you can click the New Scene option. That's how you create a new scene in Storyline. Let's create another one using the New Scene option from the Home tab. Let's add one more. So right now, you can see that all the scenes are aligned horizontally, one after another, right? You can also connect these scenes with one another. To do so, click the link icon that you see here. This gives you a list of options from where you can hover over the link to scene, option to view all the scenes available in this project. And you can select the scene to which you want to connect this scene. Let's select the second scene. Okay, so now the position of the second scene has changed. It has moved to the bottom of the first scene. You can connect more than one scene as well. For example, let's connect the third scene with the first scene using the same process. Click the link icon. Then from the context menu, hover over the link to scene, option to view all the scenes available in this project, and select the third scene. Now you can see a tree structure has formed, showing a hierarchical structure that displays how all the scenes are connected. Similarly, let's connect the second scene with the fourth scene. Now all the scenes are connected. Here we can also connect the third scene to the fourth scene. Let's do it. All the arrows are not displaying properly. Let's click somewhere. And now we have the full visible structure. Now, you can notice that all the scenes are named Untitled Scene. To differentiate between them, you can rename these scenes as per your requirement. To rename a scene, right-click on the scene name and select Rename from the context menu. This gives you an editable box where you can change the name of the scene. Let's change the name of this scene to Lesson 1. And let's change the name of the second scene to Lesson 2. And similarly, let's change the name of the third scene to Lesson 3. That's how you can rename the rest of the scenes in your course. Now you can see that from Lesson 1, a learner can move to either Lesson 2 or Lesson 3, right? This means you need to give the learner a choice of whether they want to go to Lesson 2 or Lesson 3. The learner has both paths to choose from. Notice the red flag in the first scene. This red flag indicates that the course will begin from this scene. If you want to change the starting scene, you can select a different scene and click the Starting Scene function from the Home tab. Now the flag is moved from Lesson 1 to Lesson 2, so the course will begin with Lesson 2. The learner will see this as the first lesson of the course. If you want to make the fourth scene the first scene, you can select it and click the Starting Scene function again. Notice that the entire structure of all the scenes now looks somewhat different. The thin lines and their arrowheads indicate how all the scenes are connected and will flow when the course is played, and that's how you can work with the scenes. Now let's move on to the next component, slides. Let's go back to Storyline to check out the slides. This is the window where we created some scenes. When we double-click a scene, it will display all the slides that are present inside that scene. So let's double-click the first scene to see how many slides are inside. On the left side, you can see all the slides. Right now, we have just one slide in this scene. We can add more slides to this scene using the New Slide function from the Home tab. So let's add 3 more slides to this scene. Just as you change the names of the scenes, you can change the names of the slides as well. For example, here you can see all the slides are named Untitled Slide. You can change these names to whatever you want. Let's change the name of the first slide to Intro Slide. And let's change the name of the second slide to Learning Objective. And that's how you can change the name or title of the slides. Now you can see that hovering over the tab shows the name of the slides. Let's move to another slide and the name here changed to that. This drop-down shows all the scenes that are present in this project. You can click a scene to switch to it, view the slides in it, and work on that slide. And that's how you can view slides in different scenes and work on them. Now, let's move on to the next component, layers. Alright, now to view the layers, let's hop back into Articulate Storyline. At the bottom right of the screen, you'll see a pane called Slide Layers. This is where you can, add layers to your slide. So notice that the first layer in the intro slide is called the base layer. Using the new layer icon, you can add layers to this slide. And with the duplicate selected layer icon, you can duplicate an existing layer, creating a copy of that layer. Let's add a layer by clicking the new layer icon. Now, let's add another layer. And next, let's duplicate this layer by clicking the duplicate selected layer icon. You'll notice the word copy in the second layer's name, indicating that this layer is a copy of the second layer. Now, you might not notice any difference between these layers because nothing is displayed on the slide. So, these layers don't mean much to you right now, do they? Let's insert some text on each layer to, help you understand how each layer works when switching between them. Seeing different text on each layer will give you a clear idea of how to use layers effectively. On the base layer, let's insert the text-based layer. You can insert a text box from the Insert tab. Here's the text box. Let's insert it and write base layer. Now, let's switch to the next layer, layer 1. Notice that when I switch to layer 1, the text on the base layer is grayed out. It's still visible, but not very clearly. Let's insert a text box here and write layer 1. Next, let's switch to layer 2. Insert a text box and write layer 2. Alright, now let's switch to the next layer, which is the copy of layer 2. Insert a text box here as well, and this time write layer 2 copy. Finally, let's create a copy of this copied layer and see what happens. This time, the copy of the layer is created with the suffix 2 in the name of the layer. The text from layer 2 is also copied to this layer. Let's rename the text and add the suffix 2 to it. Now, if I switch between the layers, you'll see the text for each different layer. Notice that the text of the base layer is visible throughout, while the text of the other layers is only visible when that specific layer is selected. It's up to you to decide whether you want to hide the text of a particular layer or, display it even when viewing another layer. You can also rename a layer. It's a best practice to rename layers to avoid confusion about what content you've inserted on each layer. Always give a layer a meaningful name. To rename a layer, you can double-click the name and it will become editable. You can then rename it. For example, instead of Untitled Layer 1, let's rename it to Layer 1. Similarly, you can rename other layers. Let's Edit this layer as well and remove untitled from the name. And that's how you can work with layers. Now let's move to the next component, which is objects. All right, let's go back to Storyline. As I mentioned earlier, you can insert objects onto slides or layers. Objects include images, text boxes, shapes, audio, and video. Essentially, whatever content you can put on a slide is considered an object. For example, the text-based layer is an object. Now let's insert a shape like a rectangle. This is also an object. You can move the text box from one place to another, change its content, or create duplicates of it. Let's place a text box where you would put the slide title and make the text larger so it looks like a title. Let's insert an image as well. Navigate to the Insert tab and click the Picture function. A dialog box is opened. There are several images in this folder. Let's select one and click the Open button. Let's resize it a bit so that the other objects on the slide remain visible. So everything you see on the slide, text, shapes, and images are objects, and that covers objects. Now let's move to the next component states. You know that an object can have different states, so let's go back to Storyline and see what states look like. We will look at the different states of this rectangle. To view the states of an object, we need to go to the States pane. At the bottom, you can see the Timeline pane, but we will come back to it. For now, let's navigate to the States pane. Here you can see that a normal state is already present. As I mentioned earlier, the initial state of an object is its normal state. Whenever you create or insert an object on a slide, it is always in its normal state unless we change it. Now, let's create a few more states for this object. To do so, click the Edit States button. From here, click the New State icon. A pop-up dialog box will appear where you can enter the name of the state. There are a few built-in states you can choose from, each with its own default characteristics. Let's create a new state by naming it ourselves. Let's name it Red and then click the Add button. A new state called Red is now created in the States pane. Now, let's change the color of this box from blue to red. To do so, we will go to the Format tab and select the red shape style from here. Now we have two states of this rectangle. The first is normal, and the second is red. Let's create another state. Instead of using the new state icon, we will use the copy icon to create a copy of the current state. Now, let's enter a name for this state. Let's say black and click the Add button. Next, let's go to the Format tab and select the black colored style for this box. Once you are done creating the states, just click the Done button from here. And now you can see that we have 3 states with 3 different colors. And that's how you create different states for an object. Not only can you change the color or formatting of a state, but you can also insert objects in another state. For example, let's edit the states of this object and go to the red state. Here, let's insert a pentagon over the rectangle and click Done. Now we have 3 states where one state has an object placed in it. You can apply different animations to that pentagon as well. Now the next key thing we will learn about is transition. You know what transitions are. I told you about a few minutes ago. And now I will show you how it works. To apply transitions, just head over to the Transition tab and select whatever transition you want to apply. Right now I am applying transitions on the main slide or the base layer. If I switch to the next layer, you will see that no transition is applied here. So let's apply another transition here. And if I move again to another layer, there is no transition here as well. Let's apply one here too. And let's apply transitions to the other 2 remaining layers as well. Applying transitions is very easy, and you apply transitions like this only. So you see, you can have different transitions for different layers. When I preview these slides in a few minutes, you will see these transitions in effect, how they display when the preview plays. All right, let's move ahead to animations. Animations can be applied to objects only. So let's go back to Storyline, and here are the objects on which I'll try to apply some animations. So first up, I'll apply an animation to this text. We want this text to, grow when it appears on the screen. And to apply the animation, we'll head over to the Animations tab. From here, we'll expand the entrance animation dropdown. And here we can see there are some entrance animations from which we can choose. Let's select the grow animation. You can also choose different effect options from this dropdown. Let's go with from left. Now, to preview how your animation looks on the screen, there are two ways to do it. Let me show you the first method. The first method is that you can go to the timeline pane. From here, you can click this play button, and the objects on the screen will start to display the animation. You can see that the text came from the left end and grew from small to big. You can click this square icon to stop the preview. Now let's apply an animation to this rectangle. And this time I will apply a motion path animation to this object. Motion path allows you to move an object on a path that you define. Here you can see that there are different motion paths: basic, shapes, and custom. Custom is something that you can draw on the slide to define how the object should move. Let's select the first path, which is lines. You can see where the final position of the object will be displayed in light color. You can hold the red dot and move the object on the slide to a position where you want that object to be present after the animation completes. Let's keep it here. Now let's click the play button to see how this animation works. So you saw that the object moved along the path that we defined for it. Pretty cool, isn't it? So that was all for animation. Now, let's move to the next very important component: triggers. Triggers are a beautiful and useful feature of Articulate Storyline. They open up a range of possibilities that you will not find in basic presentation tools like Microsoft PowerPoint. Let's go to Storyline and see how it works. I mentioned earlier that this rectangle is an object as well as this text is an object. So we can apply triggers to this rectangle as well as to this text. Let's apply a trigger to this text. To apply a trigger, let's select this text and go to the triggers pane that you see on the right side of the screen. Here you can see the triggers that are already present on this slide. To add a trigger, click this Create a New Trigger icon. A dialog box will open where we can define how the text should behave when certain things happen on the slide. Alright, so there are three key things in a trigger: action, when, and conditions. Action means what should happen, when means when that action should happen, and condition helps you define in what situation that action should happen. Now, if you expand the action drop-down menu, you will see various actions that you can define for this object. Let's select Change State if it means I want to change the state of something. This is the action that I want to happen. Next is the object. Now, which object state do I want to change? Clicking it gives you all the objects on the slide. Let's select the rectangle. You can notice a red border around that rectangle. It helps you correctly select an object. So, now we have defined two things: the action that should happen and the object on which the action should happen. Now, the third thing is the state. So, which state do I want to change the rectangle state to? Right now it is saying normal, but the rectangle is already in the normal state. So we want to change its state to something else. Clicking the normal state has shown a drop-down menu from where we can select different states for that rectangle. At the top are custom states that we created for this rectangle, and then there are built-in states that are by default in Storyline. And there is a drag and drop states. We'll come back to these states later. For now, let's select black, which is a custom state that we created. Now, the next thing to define is to select when the above action should take place. Right now, it is set to when the user clicks text box 4. The text box 4 is the box where I am rectangle is written. So let's say I want this to happen when the user clicks text box 4. I want the above action to take place. So we will not change anything here and click OK. Now, to see our triggers in action, we have to preview it. To do so, we can click this preview icon that you see here, and a new window will open where we can preview the triggers or anything that we have created on the slide. Did you notice how the screen slid from the bottom? That was the transition that we applied on this slide or on this layer, and the animations on the objects are also displayed here. Now we will click this text to see whether it impacts the state of the rectangle. And here you can see that the moment I clicked on the text, the color of the rectangle changed from blue to black. Let's go back to the slide. Now let's work with triggers again. We will work with this text box only, so let's remove all the other objects from the slide. To remove the objects, I'm just selecting the objects and pressing delete on my keyboard. This time I want this text to become longer. When I hover over it, and I want the text to become red in color when I click on it. So there are two things. First, when I hover my mouse cursor over this text, the length of this text should become longer, and second, when I click on this text, the color of the text should become red. Let's see how we can do this using triggers. Let's select the text and go to the States pane. Here, click the Edit States button and click the new state icon. Let's name this state Long Text and click the Add button. Now let's enter a few words in the text box. Our second state is ready. Now let's create a third state. Let's copy this state and enter the name of the state, for example, long and red, and click the Add button. This time, let's add a few words to this text. And let's also change the color of this text from black to red. You can also select from these shape styles, but we don't want shape styles. We want to change the text color to red. So let's head over to the Home tab and click this icon. Now we are done creating states. Let's click the Done button. Now we will add triggers to this state. Let's keep the text selected and click the Create a New Trigger icon from the Triggers pane. Here, the Change State of Action is already selected, quite perceptive of storyline. Now we need to select the object from the dropdown. Let's select the text box. It is text box 4. Now click Normal and you can see all other states of this text box. Let's select Long Text. Now we will update the When property. Here from the dropdown, we will select the Hover option. And the text box 4 is already selected, so we don't need to change anything here. So overall, the story goes something like this. When the user hovers over text box 4, change the state of text box 4 to long text. So this is what will happen. Another thing to notice here is this checkbox. It says Restore Previous State when the user hover out. It means when I will remove my cursor from the text box, its state will change back to normal. Click the OK button. Notice that a new trigger is added to text box 4 here in the pane. Now we will create another trigger that will show the long and red state when the user clicks on this text. Notice that it has an existing trigger. We used this trigger when we had that rectangle, but as we do not have the rectangle now, it is showing unassigned. So instead of creating another trigger to show the long and red state, we will just update this existing trigger. To edit an existing trigger, double-click it, and the same trigger dialog box will open. Here, select the object text box 4 from the drop-down menu. Click Normal and select the long and red state from the drop-down menu. And here in the When property, we don't need to change anything. We want the user to click text box 4 so that the above action can take place. Now both the triggers are applied. Now let's go ahead to preview the triggers. Let's first hover over the text, and you can see that the moment I hover over the text, the long text displays. And the moment I remove my cursor, the state goes back to normal and the previous text displays. Now let's click this text, and you can see the text has become longer and red. It is showing the long and red state, and moving the cursor changes the state back to normal, and we can click it again to show the long and red state, and then we can go back to normal again. Now let's go back to the slide. So far, you saw how you can use triggers to change the state of an object. Now let me show you how you can use triggers to switch between layers. Let's say I have an object on this slide which I can click to display layer 2. Let's insert a rectangle shape and name it Show Layer 2. Now let's add a trigger to it. Here in the Trigger Wizard, open the Action drop-down and select Show Layer. A layer is already selected in the Layer option. Let's change it to Layer 2. Now in the When property, it says when the user hovers over, but I want the user to click on that rectangle. So from the drop-down, let's select User Clicks. The object property is fine. It has rectangle 1 in its place. So let's go ahead and click the OK button. Now let's go to preview the slide. Here you can notice that clicking the rectangle object displayed the text Layer 2 that was on the Layer 2. And the text displayed very slowly because I had added a transition effect on that layer, if you can remember. Now let's go back and add a background to this second layer to differentiate it from the base layer. Let's go to the second layer and insert a rectangle. Let's cover the entire layer with the rectangle and move it behind the text. Let's change the color of the text from black to white. And let's increase its size as well. Reposition it to the center, make it bold, resize it so the words can fit better. And now let's go to preview. Here let's click the rectangle, and you can see that the second layer is appearing with the transition, and now it has appeared successfully. And that's how you can use triggers on objects to display layers. Let's go back to the slide, and that's how you can work with triggers. Now, the next component, or the last component that we'll look at in this lecture, is the timeline. Let's go to Storyline, and here you can see the timeline. You have already seen it, but this time we will try to work with it. You know that the timeline allows you to define the duration for which you want an object to display on the screen. So here we have two objects on the slide. Let's reduce the duration of these objects. To reduce the duration, you can grab the ends of the objects and drag them to the duration as per your desire. This blue line with an arrowhead at the top is called the playhead. You use it to play the slide from a specific time. Clicking this square icon brings back the playhead to the start of the timeline. Now let's click play. You can see that the rectangle appeared first, and after a while, the text appeared. Let's insert another shape to this slide. Let's change its duration as well and update the duration of other objects as well, so that all the objects can display one after another. And let's reposition the objects as well on the slide. Now let's click play on the timeline, and you can see that all the objects are displaying one after another. And that's how you can use the timeline and Storyline to define the duration for which you want to display an object on the slide. And that was all for this lecture. I hope you must have gathered a good understanding of all the key components of Storyline. Do not forget to tell me what you liked about this lecture in the comments, and also subscribe to this channel. Thank you for watching.